Welcome to my new series, which I am calling Gay because I wanted to do an introspective look at things that I like that pertain to queer or gay themes. Recently, I watched the film version of E.M. Forster's Maurice, and it was beautiful and tragic and very reminiscent of James Ivory's future work, Call Me By Your Name, which you all know I am a big slut for. So Maurice follows the realizations of Maurice and how society cannot and will not be accepting of his sexuality and how his friend Clive fits into his world. And I watched it on YouTube and I was very enthralled for the entire 2+ hours, but then I saw something in my videos recommended list. Something also very British, very posh, and it was a clip of young Carrie Elways and Rupert Everett on a date. And I said, wait, hold the phone, what is this? And so I did a bit more digging, and I found that this movie was Another Country, which predates Maurice in terms of production, was based on a 1981 British play of the same name, and is a fictionalized account of Guy Burgess, a Russian spy and double agent. And so safe to say I had never seen a gay movie like this before, or a movie like this before. And I got to thinking, what could possibly have driven this man into living a life of spying in secrecy, having to hide his true identity from everyone he met? And then I did some more digging, and it was Marxism. Of course, I knew it. Marxism is the only thing that can drive gay men into a life of being spies. But upon even more digging, I found that Guy was influenced by his friend Judd, who was a Marxist. And it's their perceived differences that more or less force them to bond. See, what's really cool about Another Country is its frank depiction of homosexuality and juxtaposing it with Marxism. Guy Bennett, as he's called in the play, is trying desperately to connect with another student, James Harcourt, which is a name I would swoon over if anybody else had it. And he does so successfully. The two have to meet incognito, but Guy is blackmailed by an older boy. But Guy just wanted to become a prefect, but is blocked by his accusation because of his sexuality. Meanwhile, Marxist Judd is trying to become a prefect as well, but is reluctant because he doesn't want to endorse a system of oppression as overt as the one in their school. He makes this speech about boys who are oppressed grow up to be fathers who maintain that very oppression. There's something poetic in that. In the end, though, Guy is the only one that survives, as he's telling the story way in the future as an old man who has done some spying for the Russian government for decades. I think the important part of the script is equating Marxism and a gay man. And maybe equating isn't the right word. It's more like juxtaposing two different young men who happen to have one thing in common, and that is loneliness. And it's this loneliness that kind of just bonds them together and causes them to have a real heart-to-heart toward the end of the play, shown here between Colin Firth and Kenneth Branagh.
I can never make up my mind about spinach.
Then perhaps you're ambidextrous.
No, I am not.
You see, you know.
Well, you can't trust intuitions like that.
Well, what else is there? Are you a communist because you read Karl Marx? No. You read Karl Marx because you know you are a communist.
Well, I'm very sorry.
Well, thanks, if that's how friends react.
What do you want me to do, get a horsewhip?
Not after Delahaye, thank you.
Well, why Delahaye?
Barclay's lost his nerve. And Delahaye has a very whippy wrist.
I apologize. Quite right. It was patronizing and unforgivable.
But you couldn't help it, could you? Because in your heart of hearts, like Barclay and Delahaye and Mingus and Sanderson, you still believe, in spite of your talk of equality and fraternity, you still believe that some people are better than others because of the way they make love.
There's complete sexual freedom in Russia.
That's not a lot of comfort at the moment, actually. Martineau killed himself because he simply could not face a lifetime of all that.
You said it was a great relief knowing...
I said, in some ways. It's also a life sentence.
Both boys realize that the school is basically fucking these boys' minds up by reinforcing the idea that some people aren't meant to be in control and that those that try to step out of line are meant to be squandered, whether that means you're gay or a Marxist. The first act of the show follows the students reeling from the suicide of a pupil who was caught having sex with another boy, and the head of house tries to keep that information a secret from the outside world, mostly in fear that it will sully the school's reputation. Guy feigns nonchalance, but is actually deeply disturbed by said pupil's eventual public display of hanging. Guy isn't ashamed before because of his sexuality, but as he feels more and more exposed, there's little else he can feel. Judd, in turn, says that the suicide was caused by the school's oppression, and that no one should feel ashamed to be who they are. Judd's reluctance to become a prefect reflects his unwillingness to endorse the hierarchy of the school, and instead tries to help out Guy, who is being forced out of the school. Once a letter from Guy to Jim Harcourt is intercepted, though, everyone who Guy could have blackmailed for their own same-sex sex beats him, and now Judd looks like a total fool for supporting someone for so long. I don't claim to know a lot about attitudes towards homosexuality and Marxism in England in the 1930s, but what I can at least glean from this show is that both are understood to have a presence, but not a tolerated one. Instead of being able to just be themselves, both Guy and Judd are silenced, or are at least attempted to be silent by offers of prestige or the threat of said prestige being taken away. Judd, being a Marxist, can see right through this. He does not need a material possession or title to sequester his beliefs, because that's exactly what the institution wants of him. And Guy doesn't want this title because he would have to dampen a part of himself that he has no way to fight. And if either of them happen to take up these offers, they are no doubt going to grapple with the effects of hypocrisy by enjoying the very system that is choosing to erase them. But, as these things do, Guy faces punishment for his feelings, and Judd more or less gets off scot-free. He becomes a prefect in order to keep things from becoming worse for Guy. But with such a heady position, he can protect his friend even if Guy has little support on campus. Symbolically, the Marxist is lifting up the oppressed gay man, and that's kind of fitting, but also controversial, given that many times a Marxist train of thought can lead to worse things down the road, depending on which side of the political spectrum you are on, I suppose. If we were to theorize what happened to the characters, or the school in general, I would tend to think that, given history, nothing would have gotten better, and would have rapidly gotten worse, more oppressive. The boys would start ratting out one another for perceived indifferences. A system of overt truth-telling and loyalty would develop until all inferior feelings or ways of thought are erased, and this is the happier version of events. Guy eventually goes on to become a double agent for Russia. Why? It's not really explained, but what I can glean is that he chooses to investigate for a country whose political mindset at the time reflected that of one person who never sold him out. It's a comfort thing. Even though he and Judd never had a physical relationship, it seems that the philosophical one that they enjoyed pushed Guy much further. In the film, he reminisces about his time with Judd with fondness, because they could relate to the isolation that the other felt. The story is a tragedy, as homosexuality wouldn't readily be accepted by any leading world nation as anything other than a mental and physical handicap until as early as the 1960s, and Marxism would be forever ingrained in the public consciousness as something that is evil and unjust, or just as oppressiveness as the oppressiveness it looks to destroy. And yet, homosexuality and Marxism persist to this day, despite the need to snuff them out. This is Dustin signing off, but only for now.